Emotional dumping. What does emotional literacy have to do with it? If you were raised by a critical parent, highly reactive parent, maybe in your childhood or youth, you often witness your caregiver was out of control when it comes to emotional triggers. Then you would have all these emotions that they would basically dump in the form of anger outburst, swearing, complaining, criticizing, spitting verbal venom. If you are a child, it becomes highly traumatic because you go into an emotional overwhelm, high stress reaction, unable to go back to healthy functioning. You get stuck in that stress response. What I often see is this: if you're used to having emotions dumped on you through living in a challenging, toxic situation as a child, for example, you end up being emotionally illiterate. You don't know how to read emotions, what they do, and of course you don't know how to process emotions in a healthy way. You had no learning there, but that learning, emotional literacy has to come from experience, because we don't have experience with fear emotions. It's like emotional dyslexia. Imagine 26 letters of the English alphabet are all jumbled up, and you're meant to know the letters, read them in words and sentences, and do it quickly. So it's basically the same when it comes to emotional illiteracy. If we spend time learning physical skill and supporting people with dyslexia, for example, why can't we apply the same attitude to learning emotional skills? Look, it's really unfair expectation of someone who didn't learn emotional literacy in childhood, who survived highly reactive parents, to know, understand, read, cope, and process emotions. As children of highly reactive parents, through experience, we learned certain unhealthy things about emotions. Emotions are dumped. Emotions are uncontrollable. When we grow up, we apply same emotional learning. We often dump emotions on others, but most commonly what I see in clients is dumping emotions onto themselves. Dumping on others or dumping on yourself. Two scenarios. Which one is yours? If you're in a habit of dumping emotions externally, for example, on your family partner, you're expecting others to look after your emotional needs. So you become very reactive, aggressive, sad. Something triggers, and here comes the dump. Oversharing is a type of emotional dumping. You can't help discussing your emotions with others. You might disclose some private things about yourself to others. It's hard for you to find that balance between what is okay to share and what is not, because it happens by default. You often do not find relief, or relief is short-lived after your discussions and oversharing of emotions, and this is the red flag. Venting can be a healthy option. With venting, you discuss and share negative emotions. Then your stress reduces, you feel that relief. With oversharing and emotional dumping, the listener can get overwhelmed and ignored. They might download your emotions and be affected in a negative and unhealthy way. With venting, both the ventor and the listener are acknowledged, and there is more sharing kind of emotional dynamic happening. Energetically, emotional dumping and venting are felt very different. Venting bonds, emotional dumping separates. Now, what is internal dumping, emotional dumping? This is discussed more rarely, but I see it a lot in clients. It's also kind of emotional illiteracy. The opposite is, but when you hold your emotions inside, sometimes big and difficult emotions are produced, but you dump them and you suffer in silence. The others might not even know what is happening on the outside, because you put on a brave face, you keep a facade of a person who is emotionally coping. Again, venting is a healthy option. However, people who dump emotions internally often do not vent. This is a red flag again. They often dread any kind of emotional sharing. They judge themselves for having intense or wrong emotions that cannot be shared. They're scared to be rejected for their emotions, and they often force themselves to act positively and hide how they feel. So I shared a lot of information with you today now. And so the two scenarios: are you emotionally dumping? Are you emotional dumping externally, but one of the form is oversharing? Or are you emotionally dumping internally? And I offered you to use venting as a kind of sharing which is more bonding when you share emotions. It's okay to share negative emotions, but look out for that healthier dynamic when you're venting, when you and your listener are actually involved and are having emotional experience that is not draining or destroying the other person.